Hello, everybody. I'm here with a very special guest today. I'm here with Major Doron Spielman from the Israel Defense Forces, and I'm going to ask him some questions regarding the three hostages that were unfortunately and accidentally killed by the IDF forces. Major Doron Spielman, how are you today? Thank you for joining the show.
Thank you for having me, Beryl. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. And
I'm just
we're doing okay, but we've had better days.
I'm just going to go straight to it because this is on everybody's mind. Is it true? Are the reports confirmed? Do we have any other details? What happened? There's so much false news out there, and it seems like our enemies are using this against us. So could you please tell us some details about what happened over the weekend?
Absolutely. Over the weekend, the IDF was operating in the area of Shajia, also in Khan Yunis, also in Jabalia. And we entered a building. We have to understand it's like operating in a concrete jungle. It's an urban jungle. Our fighters are taking RPG rocket fire. We're getting hit by AK-47s. They're seeing terrorists inside the building. They're moving closer to a building. While they're getting closer to a building, underneath the ground, the same terrorists are going to the building behind them, shooting behind them. Again, you're talking. They're spider webbing through the web of Gaza that they've built for so long, and by the time you know where they are, boom, they pop up behind you. And for 70 days since Simchas Torah, day in and day out, Beryl, this is what our soldiers have been going through. And unfortunately, on Shabbat, just over the weekend, our fighters came forward. They thought they were being hit by terrorists, and they approached. They saw civilians outside a building. They mistakenly thought that they were terrorists. And yes, they in fact did kill them. It has been confirmed. It's especially upsetting because they tried identifying themselves as hostages. They were holding up a white flag. They had taken off their shirts so we wouldn't think that they had explosives on them. And they were trying to speak Hebrew. One of them ran back into the house speaking Hebrew, and caught up in this scenario of 70 days of the deceit of Hamas and deception, this horrible tragedy took place.
Which is a tragedy, and I don't want to minimize it at all, but this is stuff that happens. This is an ugly war, and I think that our enemies right now are using this against us. I saw Elon Omar this morning, or was it AOC, and she put that Israel goes against all the conventions of killing people that have white flags. It's a typical convention. What would you answer to her or to other people that are saying that Israel is immoral in their fight? Look how they even killed their own people. What do you answer to such a thing?
I think it's so absurd, because the truth is that there's probably never been another army on earth that has tried harder to protect the civilian population of their enemy than we are trying to protect the Gazan people, who are the civilian people. They are, in fact, hostages to a large degree of Hamas, our mortal enemy. And therefore, you take somebody who cannot believe that we're actually doing this. You either say it's all a bluff, or in fact, Israel, in going into Gaza, trying to rescue our hostages, trying to wipe out the monster that killed 1,200 people, are actually acting in a moral way, or do you just want to say it's not true and it's the opposite? I mean, what other army, Beryl, has broadcast for 5 weeks to a civilian population and to every Hamas terrorist in northern Gaza, head south to get out of our way? I mean, it's crazy.
It's something that hasn't happened, and which brings me to my next question. These hostages that were coming out, these three hostages that were accidentally hit by friendly fire, these hostages, it was part of a rescue mission. Why were they out in the open? Why were they now released? They had escaped. What are the mechanics? What are the details that we know right now?
So look, there's a few assumptions that we're working on right now. Either that they were left behind because of the friction of our troops with Hamas, and Hamas was on the move, or they managed to escape. What I can tell you is, as we move closer and closer to Hamas in all of these areas, they are getting more and more rattled. I mean, their chain of communication is completely broken. They no longer have communication with their battalion commanders. The battalion commanders don't have communication with the division commanders. And I can tell you from the Hamas terrorists that we are interrogating, they say time and time again that their own leadership, Yahya Sinwar, and all the heads of Hamas are disconnected from reality.
Yamach Shemo.
Yamach Shemo. And what's happening is that within this breakdown of communication, they're starting to get very scared and very rattled. And we saw the pictures of them holding the guns coming up.
Sure.
This has happened again and again and again. It just happened to another 80 Hamas terrorists who gave themselves up from a hospital, of course, where they were using with IEDs and with Kalashnikovs and the MRI machines. And this is the kind of situation. What we can see is, as opposed to what those who are trying to call on Israel to halt the initiative are saying, the truth is the ground invasion is working. The fact that these three men were out there, and again, it's so horrifically tragic, and my heart goes out to their families, as does a huge apology. The fact that they were there is only because we're here on the ground, not because of the good graces of Hamas.
Do we know? It's an ugly question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. And I don't want to know the answer of the person, but do we know who shot these people? Does the IDF know who that is?
Yeah, the IDF has done a completely microscopic analysis of what happened here. And, this is the kind of event that is not only shocking and horrific, it's also wrong. And let's just put it out there. I mean, we hug our soldiers because they are under so much stress, but this is the opposite of our rules of engagement. Even if this was a Gazan person, and under these extreme circumstances where Hamas dresses as civilians, the rules of engagement are even a normal civilian in Gaza, if they're holding a white flag and they're shirtless, you're not allowed to shoot them. And, it goes against the IDF's rules of engagement. And the person who did this and the people who did this, look, they'll have to carry it with them. And that's probably...
And by the way, I think that it's important that everybody holds grace for, this battalion, these people who are involved, because God forbid any of us should ever be in Gaza and we should be holding rifles and we should be in that level of intensity and stress. We have no idea what was going on in that moment. And I think that the entire Jewish world has to hold space and hold grace for these people, because at the end of the day, they have to carry a very heavy burden on them for the rest of their lives. And that goes as well for the international community and everybody else, is that how dare they? We were forced into this position. We were forced to a place where we had hostages. Had they not taken our hostages, we would have never had to have been in this situation in the first place. And I think that that's extremely important. And if I could empower you, if I may, when you go on to the BBC in just a few moments, how dare they accuse us of anything but trying to defend our own people? We don't want to be in this position. And it's horrific that we have to be here.
No question. And people love to lose sight of how this all began and the nature of Hamas. Correct. And the fact that this is a war we didn't want, and nobody woke up before Simchas Torah and said, let's go to Gaza, let's go go to war in Gaza. We were thinking of dancing with the Torah and being happy. And this really is a situation where Hamas has scripted this entire scenario in their evil handbook, right, in advance. I mean, this was all pre-planned. Everything down to the humanitarian situation in Gaza. I mean, it's not by chance, Beryl, that the first place that they hit on October 7th was the Erez humanitarian crossing, right? It's the same place that all the goods and all the people go back and forth, because amidst this whole plan of slaughtering Israelis and hiding and taking hostages and putting our hostages in the way of fire, another part of the plan was, let's make the lives of these people hell so that the international community will blame Israel. And, the international community, unfortunately, is playing right into their hands.
Yeah, it's part of their plan themselves. Here's a question for you. The rest of the hostages, any more data? There's talking about, I hear talks now about potentially a ceasefire coming up in the next week to do another hostage swap. Is that in the cards? Do we have any information regarding that?
What I can tell you is this: look, the IDF is a flexible military. If we get a call from the political echelon that there's a hostage deal going forward, we know how to scale back our operations. We did it before, and go into a defensive posture. As a soldier and as somebody who was in Gaza just last week, I can tell you that our mindset is to destroy Hamas. The orders that we are operating under is that, yes, we want to bring home our hostages, but we want to make sure that there are not going to be another round of hostages in the future. Therefore, we have to destroy Hamas. And so all of our operations are going towards this. It's balancing these two things, which seem to be impossible at the same time. That's our challenge.
Mm.
And ultimately, with the help of, Kodesh Baruch Hu, they will, in fact, come together. Because as we press them on the ground and as they're desperate, and as we get help from above as well, hopefully there'll be more and more opportunity to release our people. And that's really the only way.
I appreciate you bringing God into this picture. I think it's extremely important as a military leader, as the Jewish state, is that the only way that we're going to win against the forces of evil is if the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is on our side, and we can't lose focus of that. And I really appreciate that you, in uniform, representing the IDF, is not ashamed to bring God into the picture. For those of you who don't speak Hebrew, when he said Hakadosh Baruch Hu, that means the Holy One, blessed be He. And I think that's how we're going to win this war, ultimately. How much time do we have left, Major?
So yes, I do have to go in around 5 minutes. If I could just add one thing to what you just said about God being in the picture, I just have to tell you that, when I went into Gaza last week, and it was on a Friday, so it was Friday ago, so it was, I think, the second night of Hanukkah, and it's the war, so Shabbat, the Sabbath is like the seventh day. It's all very confusing, but just before we were going to Gaza, I remembered, wait, we have to light candles, and I grabbed the menorah, and we get into the Hummer, and as we're driving in, the soldiers, all different types of soldiers, men and women, Sephardi, Ashkenazi, Yarmulkes, they all saw this, and it became a mission because it was getting dark outside. The soldiers said, we have to light the candles before dark. Wow. We're going to make it into Gaza. And we drove into Gaza, and we were inside Jabalia, which is extremely dangerous. And we found a place on top of some rubble, and everyone came together, and we lit those little candles. And it was maybe the most powerful lighting. And that is because the Jewish people, even if we don't always talk about God, we know that that's why we're here. That's why.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. I've been asking myself, and maybe you can answer this question. I've been paintballing before. I don't know if you've ever been paintballing before. And it's scary, all right? It's scary. You're there in the thick of it. You have your gun. You're shooting. You don't want to get shot. It hurts when you get hit. And that's with your friends, and that's with paintballs. It must be absolutely terrifying to be in the middle of Gaza with real bullets, and it's not your friends on the other team. It's Hamas. How do they physically fight to make sure that they are not getting killed? Meaning our soldiers. How does that practically happen? We all saw that video of the soldier who they threw a grenade at him and it blew up, and then he continued to go and he eliminated the terrorist. But how does it happen, practically speaking, that our forces are not, they're on their home turf, like you said, they're going through their web, they're going through their tunnels, they know that the lay of the land, and we don't. We're coming into their fresh. How practically speaking are our troops not getting killed in this one-to-one combat?
First of all, you're correct that when we look at the combat, our troops are at the very, very top of their game. I mean, the ratio of the number of terrorists that we are able to kill in proportion to, God forbid, our fighters that they're able to kill is a completely different scenario. And it comes down to two things. In the same way that Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, I'm sorry to make the comparison, practiced harder than anybody else. The IDF practices and trains harder than anybody else. And when you're under fire, that's what you have to fall back on. That's the first component. It's high-level practicing, training. It's being very open about your mistakes. There's a tradition in the Israeli army that doesn't exist possibly in any other army in the world, which is even a soldier can tell his commander in certain circumstances where the commander went wrong. And the commander will ask, tell me where I went wrong. It's a very Jewish trait to do this. It's like a Yom Kippur after every single type of practice. So that's on one hand. On the other hand is, the other reason why we are so effective is because Israeli soldiers are taught to think independently. And
are taught what, sorry?
To think independently. And so when the structure breaks down, or if two soldiers find themselves off to a side, they immediately know how to go into like a command and soldier mode and move forward. And it's that individual thinking and responsibility that goes into action in the most difficult circumstances. And again, we've made mistakes, and we're speaking at a time when we've made tragic mistakes, but in the same spirit of what I'm saying, Beryl, we're going to learn from them, and we're going to come out of this on a higher level. And the horrific death of those three soldiers, and I would not want to be their parents, my heart goes out to them, is going to make the IDF a better army and hopefully bring home
Amen.
additional
Amen.
people.
Major Doron Spielman, thank you so much for joining the show today. I really appreciate it. I hope that next time we meet, it is celebrating over good news, and keep on doing the good work that you're doing. We're all behind you. God bless you, and may we see good times going forward, and the rebuilding of the third temple with Mashiach now. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Be well.